Hi, everybody, and welcome to the SOLS Finishing Strong Graduate Student Writing Clinic. This video is on our mini lesson, thesis statements. My name is Professor Emily Packer, and I'm happy to be here with you to walk you through any and all things related to thesis statements today. How is this writing clinic structured? So we are going to be workshopping as we go. So we are going to review academic writing suggestions. I encourage you to workshop your document or documents as we review. So as I'm going through information on thesis statements, please have some writing pulled up so you can start editing, revising, and adding to it. But of course, if you have any questions or concerns, please visit us at the Writing Center. We are happy to help you with your academic writing. So let's check in with ourselves before we jump in. What are you struggling the most with your thesis statement? So maybe this is something you're not really sure about. You don't know what thesis statements are. Maybe you can't really find yours. Maybe you're unsure of how to structure it. So just let's check in with yourself. What are you struggling with the most? Okay, so let's dive right in. Thesis statements. Now, the definition of a thesis statement is a main point, idea, or central message. It's really the argument that you make in your paper that you want the reader to understand first and foremost. So every paper should have one. So I should be able to read through your intro and be able to understand what you're going to be writing about and your main point of your paper. That's what a thesis statement is. Thesis statements have a bunch of different purposes, but let's go through some of the general ones. So really, a thesis statement should focus your ideas in 1 to 2 sentences. So when you start your paper, you'll always have, or most of the time, have an introduction. In that introduction paragraph or paragraphs, you should have a clear sentence or 2 sentences that captures your main point or your main argument. This helps tell the reader what your paper is going to be about, and it provides some direction for your reader. It helps guide your writing and keep your argument focused. So I always say that if your thesis statement is your palm, all of your ideas should be your fingers. So they should be directly linked to your thesis statement. This can really help if you tend to write a lot and have a hard time trying to narrow it down, or if you get lost in your writing like me, but your thesis statement is your rock, okay? This is what it comes back to. It appears in the beginning of your paper, like I said, in your intro. And, I always tell students that your thesis statement evolves and changes throughout the course of your writing. So just like research questions, just like other parts of your writing, you don't need to get married to your thesis statement right away. You can revise it, you can add to it, you can adjust it as you continue with your research or continue with your writing. That is totally normal. Nothing is set in stone. And actually, I'm going to highlight that point because you can and should edit your thesis throughout writing your paper. This thesis statement may need to adapt along with your understanding of what you're writing about. So just to underscore that point, don't be afraid to go back and edit it if you need to. So well-developed thesis statements are usually complex or compound complex sentences if we're getting into grammar. So you may use coordinating subject conjunctions, my apologies, such as and, but, or, for, so, yet, nor, so fanboys for all of my grammar students. They also may use subordinating conjunctions like although or since or because. So our thesis statements are usually pretty complex in terms of how it's written because we're projecting or we're showing our readers our full idea in 1 to 2 sentences, which can be difficult. So when we have a clear thesis statement, we want to avoid a few things as well. Okay, so we want to avoid technical language, and technical language is very specific to your topic. And unless you're writing a technical report, you don't need to include this language. If you feel like you definitely want to include it, make sure that it is defined somewhere else in your introduction. Don't assume that the reader is going to understand the technical language that you use. even if your audience is within your subject matter. You also want to avoid jargon. This is kind of the same reasoning for technical language, because really our thesis statements need to be accessible to all of our readers. So we need to make sure that we are not using jargon that they won't understand. So again, if you feel you really need to use a certain word or phrase, please define your construct somewhere else in your introduction so that the reader understands before moving into the rest of your essay what your thesis statement is saying. We also want to avoid vague or subjective words like interesting, exciting, unusual. So we don't really want to include adjectives in our thesis statements, okay? Because people can poke holes in this. They can argue against this. What is interesting to me might not be interesting to you. So we want to take a step back, and actually in academic writing in general, we want to avoid vague and subjective words. And we also want to avoid abstract words. Now, you might think to yourself, society, values, and cultures are not abstract words. But actually, if we're thinking about this metacognitively, society might mean something to a lot of different people, same with values and same with culture. I have an asterisk here because I want to encourage you that if you are going to use these types of words, again, to define them somewhere in your introduction. So if you're unsure of whether a construct in your thesis is understood, make sure to define it early on in your paper. Okay, so I'm using the word construct here. This is a word that we use in terms of academic writing and research, but basically means a word or phrase. So like society. If you're not sure that your readers are going to have the same understanding as you, please make sure that you define this word very, very clearly. That can help set the stage for your readers to understand deeply the rest of your paper. Otherwise, we might go throughout this paper having different understandings of the main topic, and that can lead to a lot of confusion. So make sure, if you are in doubt of whether or not your audience will understand constructs within your thesis statement, just make sure to define them, and that is an easy way to be able to include them. Now let's take a look at some of these example thesis statements, okay? So this original one up here, it says society is ... And immediately I'm questioning, okay, who is society? What exactly is going on here? One of my students wrote his thesis statement using the word community, and I had the same questions. Which community are you talking about? Please define what you mean here. So you can see that the revised thesis statement has more specific subjects: men and women, writers, television addicts, American educators, taxpayers, and legislators. Excuse me. So all of these are more specific subjects. If you say, I really want to use the word society, this is a really important point for me, use it, but make sure it's defined. We can see the same one with the second thesis statement. The media, what does media mean here? Okay, a new breed of television reporters, advertisers, hard-hitting print journalists, horror flicks, TV movies, sitcoms, National Public Radio. So this writer could produce something very specific by identifying exactly which subject this person wants to use. But again, if you want to use media, make sure it's defined. Lastly, let's tackle our verbs. Now, I know that I suggested not using adjectives and actually staying away from adjectives. And you might say, well, that's how I make my writing unique. That's how I express my own style. And actually, you can make your writing unique and express your own style through verbs. So instead of using just basic be verbs, do verbs, make verbs, we want to try to think a little bit more deeply about what we're trying to say. So I will encourage you to use any great action verb that you can find out. I usually use thesaurus.com to help me find exactly a word that I'm looking for or a different word. So generate instead of make, demolish, revolt, discover, signify, endure. So this is really where you can get creative and present your main point to your reader through your verbs and through the actions. So again, we want to stay away from subjectivity in terms of our adjectives in our writing, but we can make up for that in our creativity in our verb choice. So if you're taking a few different things away from this slide, it's define our key constructs. Don't assume that our readers understand exactly what we're trying to say, and come up with creative verbs to get your point across. So here are example thesis statements. So the first one says, an analysis of the college admission process reveals one challenge facing counselors: accepting students with high test scores or students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. So we see that this thesis statement is written very well, it's developed well, and we understand that the rest of this paper is going to be about the challenge facing counselors. And this challenge is the decision between these two options. So we understand that the rest of the paper is going to both address accepting students with high test scores or accepting students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. So if I'm looking at this, I might want to understand what extracurricular means. So this author might have wanted to define this earlier on in the introduction. But I think other than that, everything else is here. It's not technical, it's not jargon based. I don't see really any subjectivity. Now let's take a look at the second thesis statement. High school graduates should be required to take a year off to pursue community service projects before entering college in order to increase their maturity and global awareness. Okay, so this again is a strong thesis statement. We have should, so we have the author's opinion. So this might be more of an argumentative paper. Again, I'm not seeing really any sort of jargon or technical language. This author might want to define what they mean by community service projects, but it's probably not that necessary. They probably do want to define what global awareness means to them, because that's a little bit vague. So we want to see, okay, what does this author mean by this? And again, that's a perfect thing to add to our introduction. Now let's take a look at our example thesis statement. After analysis of the contributing factors of homelessness, it has become evident that tackling this national issue starts in local communities. So we start with a a subordinating conjunction, which is after. We see this as well developed. It shows that the authors have conducted some analysis of contributing factors. And the main point here is that tackling homelessness starts in local communities. So I expect this paper to focus on that point. Now, I would imagine that this author had defined what they mean by homelessness somewhere in the introduction before getting here. And that way we move forward in their writing with this shared understanding of this key construct. All right, so you can take a second and pause this video. Please identify the thesis statement in your writing. So I'll give you a hint. It should be in your introduction. So once you scroll over to your writing, take a look through your intro and see maybe your thesis statement is more than one sentence. Maybe you realize your thesis statement, you've split it, but remember your thesis statement should be 1 to 2 sentences. It absolutely should come in your introduction. It should be together, and usually it comes at the end. So take a second, as I said, pause if you need to, and identify it. If you're having a hard time identifying it, that is important for us to know. So if you're saying, I can't really find a thesis statement, it might be missing or it might not be clear. And if it's not clear to you, I doubt it's going to be clear to our readers. So at this point, you've done an amazing job in discovering that you need to work on adding a thesis statement. And that's a skill. Just discovering what you need is such an important skill to cultivate. All right, so just as a friendly reminder, since we're at the end of our video, is please visit USD's Writing Center to get help from some of our coaches. If you're really struggling with your thesis statement creation or clarity, please come and see us, send us your writing. We are here to help you. If you have any questions about academic writing, we are always an email away, so please contact us. You're not alone in this. All of us at the Writing Center have gone through our own academic writing journeys. You're never finished. So we all can empathize with where you are. So please contact us and reach out to us, and we're happy to help you. Thank you so much for coming to this mini lesson on thesis statements. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions, please contact the Writing Center. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.